Hello everyone. In this short demo, I will be showcasing how to start utilizing the tools that are available to us in Animate in order to modify the shape of objects to best enhance those principles of animation that we discussed during the lecture. Now, as discussed during the lecture, you know that objects change shape as they move in the real world, as they move through space because of different forces that are being applied to them. This doesn't happen naturally or by default in digital animation. So we need to emphasize these things by exaggerating or by deforming the objects as we would expect them to deform if they were real objects. So let's go ahead and get started. For this specific example, I'm going to be doing a stretch and squash principle. And for that, we're going to use the classic drop ball, the bouncing ball that you've done probably in your hand-drawn animation class. So for this, I am going to create me a shape, and I'm going to use this little circle, and I'm going to place it right here. Then I'm going to make sure that I select it. You'll see that it is a shape. I want to make sure that it is placed at an even number for my pixels. I don't want any intra-pixel information, so I'll say this. I'll place this at 270. And this at 90, let's say. And I want to make sure that basically I start with a clean slate, that my pixel information is on point, that everything is on whole pixels. So with that done, what I want to do is I want to turn that into a symbol. And to turn it into a symbol, remember, I can either go to Modify, Convert to Symbol, or I can press the F8 key on the keyboard. So once that's done, I want to make sure that I properly name it. I'm going to call this ball. I want to make sure that it's a graphic for now. I could use a graphic or a movie clip. It really doesn't matter at this point. I'm only going to have one frame, so it's going to be a graphic works best. And then I can change the registration point of this object. So that's the point of reference from where things are going to happen to that movie clip. Should I start calling that movie clip through code? And we're not there yet. This will become important when we start coding in the near future. So for now, let's just simply click OK. You'll notice now that this has that blue outline around it, which indicates that it is a symbol. And I have that little circle in the center, which is my anchor point, or the point of reference from where anything happens to this object. So if I were to take my free transform tool and start moving it around, you'll notice that it is being deformed from that point. Let me undo that. But with that same free transform tool, I have the ability to click on that anchor point or point of reference and move it around to place it somewhere else within the object. So I'm going to place it down at the bottom of the circle. And you'll notice now that when I use my anchor point, that's the point of reference now. So that's where things are going to happen from now, or any property that I change. In this case, we're going to be changing position and scale. So with that done, my artwork is pretty much set up to go. Let me go back to my selection tool. And what I want to do next is I want to tag that layer to be animated. So I'll go ahead and say create motion tween. And this by default gives me the 30 since I was working at 30 FPS, it gives me the 30 frames. I'm probably going to use only about 20 frames for this. So I want to place my time marker around frame 21 and select all of those frames and then press Shift F5 on your keyboard, or you can go to edit, edit, and then you can go ahead and start working with, sorry, not edit. You would find this under right click, and then you could just go ahead and remove frames if that's what you want. They're all in this section for what you can do with frames. So as you can see, remove frames is Shift F5 over here in this drop menu. So, and also to insert frames, F5, we've done that in the past. So with that done, I want to go ahead and hone in into this area. So I want to expand that so I can see my frames a little bit better. I want to move this up a little bit, and I want to center my stage up here at the top. So with that set up this way, I want to start creating my animation. So first things first, I want this ball to drop and hit the bottom of the stage. So that's going to happen around frame 10. So I'll place my time marker at frame 10, and then I'll move this ball so it touches the bottom of the stage, and I am pressing my shift key as I drag so that I maintain constraint on the y-axis. Then I want to move this ball right back up again. Now I could just go ahead and do this and move it up, and now you see that I don't know if I'm matching the first frame or not, and that's my intent, is to match that first frame. So I just undid that. One way to work, there are two ways to work this out. The long way around is what we used to do in the past, which is I would activate my tweening, my onion skinning, and I would see all the different ghost images of the different tween frames that I have in this animation. And I see the top one here is this one indicating the first frame. Now, some of you might end up, when you turn this on, you might have only a few frames around your time marker, something like this. And then what your intent would be is you're going to try to move, and you'll see that the tweening is the onion skinning is chasing the actual time marker, which is the intent. You want to have only a certain amount of onion skin around specific amount of frames. You don't want to have the entire thing. However, in our case, we want to have onion skinning so that I can actually see the beginning point. Remember, I said this is the long way of doing this. So let me stretch from those handles, from the blue handle all the way there, and then over here. Now, let's go ahead and try to move my ball all the way up to the top to try to match the visual of that previous frame, and that should do it. So that is a fairly good guesstimation of where it's at. Let me just go ahead and select the artwork on this. Let me turn off the onion skinning, select the artwork on the screen, and then making sure that I am right where I'm supposed to be. Remember, the first frame, we started at 309.5. Then we have the second frame at, sorry, we're looking at the y-axis, sorry. So we're going to start at 129.5. And if I go here, select it, that's 128. So I would either change the first one to 128, which would be my preference, 128. And now they match. That's one way to do this, and now the position of the ball is going to be exact when it gets up there. Now, that's one way. Let me go ahead and undo that really quick, because that is too long a way to do things. The fastest way to do this is for you to actually, let me go all the way until I remove that frame. I'm undoing all the way until that frame disappears. I just got there. Now what I want to do is I want to copy the properties of this object and place them here. I don't want to copy the actual frame. What I want to copy is the properties of the frame. So to do so, I'll select the frame, I'll right click it, and then right here on the flyout menu, there's something called copy properties. So I can go ahead and select that. Then I'm going to click on the last frame, right click, and I can either paste properties to match the exact properties of the first frame, or I can say paste properties special. Now, paste properties pastes everything from that first frame. Let me go ahead and say press paste properties special. And the reason for that is because this one opens up, by default, all of these things should be checked. And that means you're copying and pasting absolutely everything that came of information from that specific frame. In our case, all I really want to paste is the position. That's all I want. So I'll go ahead and say I want to turn everything off except for the position. I just want to copy the position. So I'll click OK, and you'll notice that it moves my ball to the area where that first keyframe was, and it creates a second keyframe for me. So that's a lot faster, and it gives you a lot more control than onion skinning. Now, I know the value of onion skinning for organic and fluid motion. I'm not saying don't use it. What I'm saying is there's more than one way to do this. So with that done, let me go ahead and play this back really quick. I'm going to create a loop. And when I loop it, for you, you might have only this few amount of frames for looping. Go ahead and stretch it to fit the entirety of the timeline. And let's go ahead and hit play. Now you'll notice that my animation is basically mechanical. The ball is going up and down at the same speed, which means it's linear speed, okay? And what we want to do is we want to change that in order to enhance the fact that this is starting slow and speeding as it goes down. When it hits at the bottom, it speeds up again really fast, and it slows down as it goes to the top. So let me pause this, turn off the looping, and let's go ahead and play on the details on how to do this. So for doing this, I am going to double click my layer so that I open up the properties for that layer. And I want to change only the Y values for this specific animation. That's all I want. So I want to select the Y location or Y position. And then what I want to do is I want to modify my curves. Remember, this graph represents speed of change versus amount of change. So the closer this line stays to the bottom, the slower the rate of change. as it curves up, it's going to speed up to match that position. And same thing in the coming out of that keyframe, the faster this goes down, the faster the animation is going to occur. So in this case, if this line goes down this way, creating sort of a curve this way, then the ball is going to speed up going fast, and then as the curve starts getting flat at the bottom, it starts slowing down in the motion here. So how do I do that? Well, in order to do that, you need to add extra frames in the actual graph. And to do so, we use this tool right here. So let me go ahead and select that tool, and you'll notice that with that tool selected, when I roll over the curves, I have the ability to create frames that provide me with Bezier curves. And these Bezier curves basically control the speed of playback of those frames. Now, let me go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Select frame, select the line, and place the graph right here. Now, the graph is going slightly under on this side, so I want to bring it up slightly to make sure that I do not overshoot my animation at the top. And now with that little change right there, without even changing the shape of the handles, without the position of the handles, let me go ahead and play this back. Open up, set up the loop, and you'll notice that just that alone gives you more of a natural bounce on the animation. Okay? Now you can modify this. Now that you have the handles, you can modify it whichever way you want. So let me make it really weird, see what happens. You'll see that that changes basically the way my animation is happening. I can actually force my ball to come back down halfway up if I wanted to, or halfway down. So you'll notice that the ball's going to go, it's almost like it's bubbling up before it takes off. So you can modify the shape of the curvature by using those Bezier handles and fine-tune or modify to your exact specifications for your project. So with that done, let me go ahead and set this up a little bit. Now, the only thing that is missing right now is the actual squash and stretch. And now that, because this is happening so fast, we should see the squash and stretch happening right as the ball hits the bottom. But as this is playing so fast, it's kind of difficult to see it. However, if we are proper animators, we should take the time to add those extra 2 frames in there to make sure that we actually have the squash and stretch. And to do that is fairly simple. For this, what I want to do, we already have the tools and we know exactly what to do. Let me double click my layer to close the graphing editor, bring this down and center my stage. And then what I want to do is I want that frame to be where it squashes. So, and I want to retain the position of that ball. So basically the ball should be hitting the floor around here. It stays there and squashes, and then it stretches back out to reshape itself again. So I know because this is happening so fast, I don't want to stretch it going upward. It's not necessary for me to stretch it going upward. So only the squash is the only thing I need. So that means I need to have an extra frame here with these values and an extra frame out here with the same values. So I'll go ahead and select that object, copy its properties. Then I'll go to frame 9 and I'll say paste properties. In this case, I want to paste everything. And then go to frame 11 and then click on that, paste properties. So now I have the ball down at the bottom for 3 frames. Then I'll select the frame at 10 and I will use my modify tool, my free transform tool to modify the shape of my ball by squashing it. So now the ball is going to stretch and you'll notice that something happened. Basically, my ball kind of got flattened out all the way. So let me go ahead and do that. And part of the reason for that is because I had everything selected at the time when I did the change. So let's go ahead and simply select that guy, just that one frame. You'll notice that when I do that, everything gets selected, and I don't want that. So what I want to do is I want to effect only a change to that specific frame. So because we had created only keyframes, or we had tagged the layer for motion, and we had only so far created position keyframes for the y-axis, when I copied and pasted the values for these frames, basically only copied that transformation, only that changed the location, the position value. So when I go ahead and select this frame and I squash it, the entire layer basically sort of squashes all the way, and then the beginning one gives me those values. But remember, we had copied the values originally from this when it was properly set up from frame 10. So if I go back to frame 9 and I right click again and say paste properties, you'll notice that the ball goes back to its right shape, and then frame 10 it squashes. Then I'll go to frame 11, right click and paste properties again, and there you have it. So now we have the squash animation at the bottom. That basically gives me that ability. Now if I wanted to get really picky, I could go to somewhere in here and actually stretch the ball and do the same thing to be able to start basically creating the squash and stretch modification to the actual object to emphasize that the animation. Let me go ahead and do a test for this to see what it's looking like. Control return, control enter on the keyboard, or command return on the Mac. That creates my movie clip, and I see the actual squash and stretch on that animation, and it looks pretty natural in terms of the speed of playback. So this would be one of the ways. Basically, you have a combination of things that you need to do. It's not just simply moving things around and trying to modify only the graphs on the graphing editor. You need to take into account everything that is happening and how the object is going to be changing. So if you change only location and then you request for a transformation change, you might not have a keyframe that covered that whole thing. This is why some of the people, like I said, in the real world, people within their workflows, they prefer to add keyframe all for their keyframes, so that they don't have to think about these things as they go. If you want to do so as you are creating keyframes, you can always right-click where you want and add a keyframe. As I showed you in the past, you can always go to any place that you want to add a keyframe, right-click, and then you can say Insert Keyframe All, and that will basically cover the entirety of the possible keyframes that you can add, so that you avoid having to go back and copy and paste properties like we did in this case to balance out the workflow. So I hope this helps you on getting started with your animations, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do with these.